Hello everyone and welcome to the third episode of the Wasteland Gaia tutorial series. In the last episode, we went over how to spawn game objects and how to use the terrain modification spawner. In this episode, we will be adding grass, trees, and rocks to our terrain. Alright everyone, to get started here, we're going to just head to our wasteland biome, and here you can see all the spawners that we created in the first two episodes, so all the way from our textures to our terrain rubble. And that's giving us this really nice scene with these buildings that are lovely blended with the terrain and also have these pieces of rubble all around them. In this episode, we're going to create sort of all the foliage bits, so little patches of grass, groups of trees around, and rocks on our terrain. So the first one we're going to do is trees. We're going to create a new spawner. We're going to call it Wasteland Trees. And we're going to create our first spawn rule here. So, about 301. And then we're going to change this from terrain texture to terrain tree. Now that we've done that, we're going to head to our dead trees here. And we're just going to drag in one of them. Next thing we're going to want to do is start our visualization. We're going to have 3 different types of trees on our terrain, and they're all going to follow the same rules, so we can use just some overarching spawn rules here. So a collision mask, a noise mask, and I think a slope mask will do for this. For the collision mask, we're going to simply just respect the small, medium, and large buildings that we have on our terrain. For our slope mask, we're going to invert and set this from... Actually, let's take a look around and just see sort of what results we're getting here. And actually, I'm pretty pleased with 0 to 18, so that should be fine. And then for our noise mask, all we're going to do is increase the amplitude a little. And that should be good. And the reason we're using a noise mask on this is because that'll give our terrain the appearance that because this is a wasteland, there were once fields in between these trees, and there were once groups of forest, or areas of forest as well. So another thing on this collision mask is that we're going to want to increase the padding on it a little bit. So it doesn't make much sense that trees would spawn right next to our buildings. So we're going to set the padding to 10. And then we're going to set our minimum fitness to 75%. Our location increment can stay the same for now. We may want to reduce that soon. And that's it. So if we spawn this, let's just see what we get on our terrain. Okay, not much at all. So we're going to drastically lower our location increment down to something like 5. Now we're getting groups, but not as many as I'd like. So I think what we need to do is lower our minimum fitness. I'm going to lower this down to 60% on it. We're getting sort of more what I wanted here with these groups, but I think I need to increase the location increment once again to something like 15. All right, so now we're going to duplicate this rule. Let me just expand this again. So duplicate it twice, and we're simply going to drag in the other 2 kinds of trees we have. All right, lovely. Now if we spawn this, there we go. So you can see we have groupings of trees across our terrain, and that is sort of looking quite good for a wasteland cityscape. The next thing we want to do here is our fallen trees. So to do this, we're going to head to Gaia Tools, Wasteland Biome, create a new spawner, call this Wasteland Fallen Trees. and create our first spawn rule. I'll call this one or O1. And we're going to set this to GameObject. The reason we're setting this to GameObject instead of terrain tree is because if we come and look in our fallen trees folder here, this fallen tree is quite long, and if it wasn't able to rotate to slope, so something like this, but obviously the computer does it much better than I can with my freehand right now, it wouldn't look correct. And the Unity terrain tree system does not support rotating things to slope. They're always pointed directly upwards. So we run into issues there. So what we do instead is we set it as a game object, and that way we can rotate it to slope and do all those other Gaia things. So we're going to change this from 0.15. And we're going to set it to rotate to slope. And this will make it look a lot more aligned with the terrain than it would be otherwise. So we're also going to name this to fallen tree 1. And now we're going to essentially just take the rules that we have on this and duplicate them. So we're going to copy mask settings, paste them, and there we go. So if we visualize, we can see things are looking good. So for this, I think our bounds check radius should be something around 6, because that's around the size of what that fallen tree is. And our location increment we can set to 5, because this is going to be relatively exclusive. And our slope mask needs to be way more exclusive. This can only spawn in areas like to 5. We're going to set our noise mask to be a much higher amplitude. And there we go. So minimum area fitness, we're going to set to 80%. And we're going to spawn this. All right, we clearly got far too many spawns in our terrain there. So we're going to set this to 90 and see how that goes. A few less. We're also going to turn on self-collision check. I think we're getting a couple instances. Yeah, okay, that's reduced our number of spawns quite significantly. And let me just make sure that these are all looking good. And from what I can tell, they are. I think I will increase our location increment so we get a few fewer spawns around the terrain, but once that happens, yeah, we should be good now. All right. Now we're going to duplicate this rule twice. Change the name. And then we're going to add these two others. So for these ones, they're just a more standard, just a broken off tree. So we can actually use the Unity terrain tree system for these. So we're going to set this to fallen 2. And then we can just keep all this, I believe. 3. Oh, and I believe this should be and then once we go into prefabs here, there we go. So now let's take a look at what we get when we spawn this. A lot too many spawns, so we're going to increase the location increment for all of these to something like 20. All right, that's a lot better. Okay, so moving right along here, I think the next thing we want to do is spawn some stones on our terrain. So if we go here and say Wasteland Stones as our spawner name, create our first spawn role, and then we're going to go to Game Objects and resource name Stone 1. 01 at the top there. And we're going to add an instance. We're going to navigate to our stones folder here, and we're only going to use a few of these. I'm going to avoid the ones that have some moss on them because this is a wasteland environment after all. We're going to not check any of these on because there's really no point. The stones, because they're always going to face in they're always going to look different from different angles that you look, and we have a lot of variety in them. There's not too much reason for us to rotate to slope. And for our scale, we're going to set this to be a bit random. So we're going to go from 0.8 to 1.2. And that is quite nice. All right. And now our location increment, 25 should be good. Jitter, that's good. Minimum area fitness, we can set to 85. And then our bounds radius will be 2. We're going to turn on self-collision check. And there we go. That looks good. So now we're going to set up our overarching rules. So we're on our collision mask. Set this to respect our small, medium, and large objects. And we're also going to make sure that we don't collide with our trees. So we're going to make sure that that doesn't happen. There we go. So now you can see if we go here, you can see we shouldn't collide with the trees on our terrain. And I will set this to 1 or 2 for all the rest of the trees and 1 for the fallen tree. Or no, we can keep it for 2. Looks good. All right. So I'm going to quickly add all the rest of these to our spawn rules, and nothing should change too drastically. All right, so all those have been added. Next, we're going to add a slope mask to this, and it's going to be quite extreme. We're going to have rocks on anything from 0 to 45, and let's just visualize here and see what that looks like. So yeah, rocks on everything but the most extreme slopes. I might lower this to 40, yeah. It's a bit more inclusive, I think. Now we're going to increase our padding on this to set it to 10 or so. And now we're going to spawn and see how this looks. Okay, I think we got a few too many spawns, a lot more than we wanted here. But we've got rocks pretty much everywhere. So now we're just going to fix this on all of our stones here. We're going to increase the location increment. And also we're going to decrease the spawn probability rate here. Or rather, we're going to increase it or decrease it here. So I'll cut back once I'm done. Okay, so I've changed all of our stones to have a spawn probability rate of 75. So that means that even if a spawn matches the requirements, 1/4 of the time it will just not spawn the rock. I've increased our location increment to 30, and I've increased our minimum area fitness to 90. So let's see how this looks now. Alright, I think that's a lot more acceptable as a number of stones on our terrain. It's not so crazy. And another thing I think might be wise is to set the layer of all these stones to PW small. So we're going to, yes, change children. And then this will allow us to not cover them in our collision mask here. So if we make a new layer game object targeting small and set this to something like 2, and we visualize, now we won't spawn on stones that have already been created. So that'll increase the spacing a bit more. All right, perfect. So the next thing we need to do is set up our grass spawner. So we're gonna, again, create a new spawner here, wasteland grass. Then we're gonna create our first spawner. So for this, we're going to set up terrain detail. Call this grass 1. Call this grass 1. And we want our grass to be really patchy for this. So we're going to set our first we're going to make a slope mask, and then we're going to make a really interesting noise mask here. So our noise type will not be Perlin, it'll be billow noise. And I do need to visualize to make sure I'm doing this correctly. I need to remember to invert this. And we also need to increase the amplitude, yes. So now, if we zoom out a lot here, you can see that now we'll have these patches of grass intermittently placed around our scene, which should look pretty good. We'll zoom out just a little more, and nice, 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 nice. All right. So now we're going to head here and we're going to drag in our grass texture. We might want to increase the, sorry, not the noise spread there, but the detail, or decrease the detail density so that it looks quite patchy. And we're simply going to take the collision mask here and replace it in here, or so that we don't get collisions with trees, rocks, or our giant buildings there. Okay, so if we spawn this, let's see what happens. Okay, so we do get some spawns, which is what I was looking for. Now, a really important thing when you're working in an HDRP project like this one is to enable flora on all of your grass assets. You don't do this because HDRP doesn't support Unity terrain grass. Your grass simply won't show up properly in the game view. When flora gets ticked on, it'll not only improve the grass and generate some meshes from a 2D plane that you have there, but it'll also allow you to see the grass on your terrain in HDRP. So all we have to do is our enable flora system here. And if we go into our game view, we can see how this looks. Okay, so now you can see we have some pretty nice results. Grass scattered around our scene here. And let's take a look at how this looks when we add the other 2 types of our grass that we're going to spawn. So we'll just duplicate this rule twice, and then drag in grass patch 1, and grass patch 3. And now let's make sure all the names are correct. All right, excellent. So now let's spawn this again. Okay, that's looking quite a bit better. We still get some fringe cases where it's larger than the rest of our grass, but it does seem to be mostly uniform, as we would like it to be. The last thing I want to do here is to create a fern spawner that will spawn some ferns around the base of our buildings. So some greenery has grown in the shadow of these ruins in our wasteland environment. To do this, we're going to go to Create New Spawner, call this Wasteland Ferns, and create a new spawn rule. As you can see, I've already navigated to our environment ferns, and we're going to set the resource type to terrain tree. Ferns are often perfect for using with the Unity terrain tree system because it doesn't really matter how they're rotated to slope or anything like that, and you can save a lot of performance by using the tree system. So if you go to Fern, name this Fern 1, or O1 rather, drag this prefab in, and call this Fern 1. All right, then we're going to lower our location increment to something like 12, and our minimum fitness to 80 or so. Now let's turn on visualization, and I'm going to show you how to make this collision mask so there's a sort of ring around our buildings. So we're going to have a layer game object, going to respect only medium and large objects, so only our big buildings here. And we're going to keep the padding on that 0. Then we're going to have a new rule. We're going to invert it. We're going to respect the same things, but this time, oh, did I do small there? Yes, I did. But this time we're going to set a padding of something like 5. So now you can see we have this ring around our buildings that is just perfect for spawning things like ferns. And this is very similar to what we did with, actually it's the same thing, to what we did with the concrete fragments and the rubble, I believe. So now that we have that collision mask in place, that is all we need because we know that these buildings will always be spawned on a relatively flat area. We don't really need to put a slope mask or anything like that in. And now we're just going to spawn this and see how it looks. All right, we got some pretty good results. I think, yeah. Okay, yeah, that's looking great. One other thing that you should do, just so that we don't have collisions here or in places where the rubble is quite close to the buildings, is you should add another collision mask within this, just making sure that we don't collide with PW object small and set a padding of 1 there. So now you can see that it'll avoid things like that. Now we're going to go down, duplicate this rule, change the name. And actually, I think I shouldn't have changed the name there because, yeah, there we go. And we're going to also change the location increment of this one to something like 10. So this will make sure that we have a slightly less dense system going on here. All right, looking around here, I'm really liking the way this is turning out. And I think I'm pretty satisfied with how that has resulted. The only thing I might change is instead of increasing this or putting that down to 10, I'll increase it to something like 15 so that we just get a few fewer spawns around. And yeah, that should be great. Yeah, that's nice. Just zooming out here, we don't really have as many trees as I would like on our terrain. So before we really finish up here, I'm going to increase the amplitude of our noise mask spawn. Getting better. Let me look at the visualization here. I need to tick off small, I think. Yeah, okay. So if we lower the amplitude perhaps a little bit. spawn again. There we go. That's sort of more what more of the density that I would like with these trees. Will lower it a little bit more, but not so significant that it will significantly change response. Alright, that is quite nice, I think. So now one of the most important parts of when you're finished your biome and you want to use it on other terrains is saving. So to do that, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to head to Advanced, and this is under your parent of the biome. Save and load, save biome preset, and then you can save it to Gaia user data biomes or another folder that you have specified in the project, and you can name it whatever you'd like. In this case, we're going to name it Wasteland because it is our Wasteland biome, and then just hit save. And now that it's done saving, you can see we have our Wasteland here, and this biome can be applied to any terrain that we would like. One thing that is sort of important for biomes to improve your workflow is ticking on this little S here, so that whenever you make a new stamp on the terrain, the Wasteland texture spawner will run again, and just retexture everything so that you have a nice effect on your terrain. So this is really helpful when you're adding stamps again and again, so it'll automatically do that for you. And now if we just want to test this, we're going to create a new scene. Call it Wasteland Test. We're going to save our changes. Now we're going to open the Gaia Manager. And we're going to create a new world with our target biome as Wasteland. And I should say that if it isn't popping up in your target biome list, you're going to want to head to Setup Project and just run the Gaia maintenance. It won't take long at all, and it should detect that Wasteland biome and give you a prompt to add it. Once you click Add, then you can do this. So then we're going to set our workflow to manual with stamper here and create terrains. Gaia will prompt us to set up HDRP lighting. We will. And let's just find a stamp that looks good. This one looks great. Inspector and stamp that out. There you go. So it's run the texture spawner that I was talking about earlier. And now if we spawn our Wasteland biome on this, there we go. You can see we get some lovely results. We have 3 distinct little city centers here. And yeah, everything's looking really great. We have all our grass patches, trees, and everything is just how it should be for our Wasteland. And now you can apply this type of biome to any environment you would like. The last thing I wanted to show you guys here is how lighting can affect your scene. If we zoom in here, and we still do need to add our runtime, let's do that. We can see already this has really improved the look of our scene. But if we go into our Gaia runtime and our Gaia lighting and change our lighting profile to a more evening look, then you can see this really begins to look like a wasteland. We have this sort of reddish tint on our terrain and things look a lot better cinematically than if we were to do this during the day. So the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to record a quick cutscene, and I'm going to showcase what we've achieved over the course of this tutorial series. Okay everyone, thank you so much for watching this series on how to use the latest version of Gaia. Please put any questions or comments you might have down in the comments section, and until next time, see ya.